Hello, my name is John Vargo, and I'm a senior at Stevens High School in Rapid City. I'm a parishioner at the Our Lady of Black Hills Parish. I was born into a Catholic family. I went to CCD every Wednesday, but I didn't really have a prayer life at home. I didn't really know much about the church. I just sort of went with my family. When I got into middle school, my father and brothers had stopped going to church, and then soon after I stopped going. But my mom was resilient, and she kept going. And it was in 8th grade when I decided that I didn't really care about church or care about God. So for lack of a better word, I declared myself an atheist. Now, I didn't really know if I believed in God or if I didn't believe in God. I was just a lazy atheist. And soon after I declared myself an atheist, my mom decided to stop going to church. And it was in my freshman year when I noticed this. Around the Lenten season, I noticed that my mom was no longer going to church, and she was once a devout Christian. So I was still making Lenten promises and still making sacrifices during Lent for no apparent reason, I guess. And my freshman year, I made the decision to promise my mom to go to church every Sunday with her, because I wanted her to be who she was, and it was because of me that she wasn't. Now, I still didn't believe in a God. I didn't really care about what I was doing at church, but I was doing it for my mom. At the end of the Lenten season, I had been doing youth group at church for my friends, and they mentioned a group called Duke and Alton that was coming at the beginning of the summer, so I decided to do that. And during Duke and Alton, they sent me to confession, and I went in and I knew Father Mark, and I told him that I hadn't been to confession since my first communion, and so I didn't really know what was going on. So we went through of my sins, and I told him that I had stopped believing in God for 2 years, and that I had stopped going to church for 2 years. And then something amazing happened. He said, "I absolve you of your sins." And that really was confusing to me. I didn't really know how someone who ignored God, hated him, could be forgiven after 2 years of not doing anything. And so after confession, I went up to Father Mark and I asked him how I could start to learn about the Catholic faith and learn about what my mom believed. So he said he would order me a book called the Eucat that Pope Benedict put together. And so I left the church, and I didn't really think much about it. And then, as I was mowing my lawn one day by the road, a car drove in. And since I was the only one home, I drove the mower over to the car, and a woman came out and handed me a book. And she said, "I work with your mom, and she's told me about how you're trying to rejoin the church." And the book she handed me happened to be the Eucat. And she said, I've been praying for you, and I want you to look over this." She left, and I thought about two things. I thought, number one, why is my mom talking about me at church? But number two, why is this random lady who's never met me before, doesn't know anything about me, praying for me? And so at that moment, I knew that God loved me because he had sent someone to pray for me. Someone who wanted God's love and wanted to spread God's love came to me. So I went inside and I read the Eucat cover to cover, which I don't suggest. But I read it cover to cover. I learned everything I could about church. And now I've turned into someone who really wants to know God's love. I started going to Totus Tuus. I started going to youth rallies. I started going to Duke and Alton. And in this last summer, I went to Brazil for World Youth Day with 3.5 million other Catholic youth and with Pope Francis. And Pope Francis, during Mass on Copacabana Beach, told 3.5 million people during his homily to go without fear and to serve the Lord. Now, he repeated that phrase many times throughout his homily. And before he sat down, he said, "Catholic youth of the world, Will you go without fear and serve the Lord? And in unison, 3.5 million people, dozens of different languages, people shouted yes. Pope Francis paused. Catholic youth of the world, next week when you're home without the 3.5 million people supporting you, with people in your neighborhood who do not like your faith, will you remember the yes that you shouted at me today? And again, 3.5 million people shouted yes. So I'm here today to spread that message to you, to go and change the lives of other people like Julie Lantis did to me, like I'm doing to you. Go without fear to serve the Lord, because that is the ultimate lesson of the Catholic youth. That is the ultimate lesson of the disciple of Jesus Christ, is to go without fear to serve the Lord, because that is how we make better people. We change people's lives and we